Friday afternoon, folks. Ted Ralston here in our downtown studios at ThinkTech Hawaii with some excellent guests. Again, as you all know, this show is defined totally by the quality, the innovation, and the creativity of the guests that come on here, and I thank you very much. First of all, Brian Chee,
nice to meet you,
University
Ted.
of Hawaii, and the IT department, and also the organizer, or one of the planners of last week's Mini Makers Faire.
Thank you. Actually, it's the
Iolani.
School of Ocean Earth Science and Technology.
Even better, okay. And Jeff Eliasen of the Hawaii Drone Club.
Yep.
And some other ilks, perhaps, lurking in the background there in terms of
just a
software
few.
management and such. So we're here to talk about what took place last weekend at Iolani and what's taking place this Saturday at Iolani in the kind of the soft explosion of technology merging and integrating interest that's coming up that hasn't really got a definition yet. It's sort of defined as Makers Faire, sort of defined as Makerspace, but this whole volcano of creativity that's starting to happen in Kaka'ako, in Honolulu, in Kalihi.
We call it more the maker movement. And Hawaii is unique, and we do a lot of making to begin with. And the maker movement here in Hawaii, the whole Maker Faire concept was actually born at the Unconference, which, oh, by the way, is tomorrow. And I think it was like three and a half, almost 4 years ago. And a bunch of us came together and said, why don't we have our own Maker Faire? And then a whole bunch of us just got shanghaied. And this is my second year of helping to organize it. And we've been using a lot of resources from my lab at the University of Hawaii, and also resources from places like TV and InfoWorld Magazine to try and help make this happen.
So what you do is you bring together people who are involved in either development or application use of technology elements, put them on display, let them interact, and let the public.
There's a lot about creativity. Hawaii likes making things in general. What we're trying to do is just provide a nice, rich environment for people to share information. Everybody asks me what's the difference between us and Silicon Valley, and I said, well, it's the impetus, it's the ability for people to share and to have very free technology transfer. And in Silicon Valley, the schools like Stanford and so forth are the center of it. And it is my opinion that the University of Hawaii really ought to be a center and provide the fan for the flame. But the community is drawing together despite some of the things that the university stumbles over.
Well, universities are like that, just internal politics being what they are and such, but you're beating that trend and getting out there with these beacons of technology.
Right, yeah, the dean of the school has given me the freedom to be an incubator within SOS, to find and attract technologies that are appropriate to our research projects. And the Maker Faire was a beautiful way of doing this. I actually helped run a Raspberry Pi program workshop this time. And the idea is we're trying to get more and more people involved with embedded systems. And that fit in very, very nicely for what the school wants. We want high school kids to get experience with things like Raspberry Pis and Arduinos, to graduate and then come to school at the University of Hawaii School of Ocean, Earth Science, and Technology.
And let me take that one step further after we talk a little bit about one subset within that larger community, and that's the drone community, which Jeff represents.
Yeah.
And you guys had some drag races, right? Some drone drag races.
Well, it wasn't quite drag races. What we had was a course where during various times, people were either competing in, there was a speed event, so basically imagine NASCAR, one car on the track at a time, doing laps around a track. And there was also a skills event where people had to do some fairly detailed what's the word I want, very intricate flying. And the whole point of the contest was twofold. One was to let more people in Hawaii just see what drones can do and how many people are using them. And two was to give some of the best drone flyers in the state a chance to show off their skills.
How'd it work out?
Worked out pretty well. It was a little bit windy, which always creates challenges.
Challenge,
but
nice challenge.
Yeah, and we only had about 6 or 7 people compete, but we had about 20 people over the course of the day show up just to take advantage of the course and do some free flying and show off their drones to the crowd. And we actually drew a pretty big crowd. There were times where there were 50 or 100 people watching.
That's pretty good. That's like 10% of the total turnout of the event,
about there.
if that's the case.
Yeah, our total was 1105 this year.
Of course, I was intended to be part of that. We actually had a talk later in the day on the broad subject of drones. Earlier in the day, we were down at the Makahiki, the Boy Scout activity in Ala Moana Park, trying to do the same thing. Couldn't fly down there, but we had the simulator instead of the actual UAVs, and had a lot of attention by the kids. And the good thing about a simulator is the kids, no matter what age they are, they sit down and start doing it. They don't have to have any instruction. They don't need adults around. They can get the job done. So, very inspiring form of almost a self-outreaching technology.
Yeah, and we've gotten to a point now, one of the interesting things with radio control vehicles and autonomous vehicles in general is that we've gotten far enough into the process that most of the makers now, the actual manufacturers building these and designing these, are building them in such a way that the average person can sit down and pick it up in 15, 20 minutes. You can be flying a $2,000 drone and feel pretty comfortable about it and know that if something goes wrong, you push a button and it's going to fly itself home and land in front of you.
I was going to bring that up. One of the things we've talked about on this show several times with folks who are involved in that from the manufacturing side and the software side is the whole issue of reliability and system safety up to DO-178C level, which is, you know, big word, but that's what we have to face sooner or later here.
Yeah.
That's a whole different subject. It is how drones are moving forward within the FAA and how much latitude has been actually created in moving these forward. But that then goes back to the point that Brian was raising about an incubation center, an acceleration center. And we had a meeting at UH last Thursday, a week ago yesterday, brought together all the drone programs in UH and had that very same discussion. What are people doing? And we had DNLR there and Board of Water Supply. What are the needs? Try to pull that together into a makerspace, actually.
And the reality is the University of Hawaii has a very large number of drone projects. I'm actually involved with one to take a NASA drone, so it's a military level drone, and we're going to be doing thermal imaging and LiDAR imaging and so forth to create much more detailed maps of lava fields. I'm also working on another drone project where I'm going to be lofting a LiDAR and also a mirror. I'm going to be bouncing a fairly high-powered laser off a mirror, hit the water, measure the backscatter to be able to go and find more of those mustard gas dumps that were dumped off the Hawaiian Islands after World War I. The University of Hawaii has been very involved with that, but now we need to find the older ones that are buried by silt. And we should be able to find that with Raman spectrometry.
So you're looking at the molecular interception of the laser return off the mirror.
Yeah, and if you take that idea a little further, it's actually easier to find things on land. So I'm kind of hoping to extend that a little bit with a lighter drone, less expensive, to take maybe to Angola to find unexploded landmines and then maybe shoot a fluorescent paintball at it so the villagers can avoid that.
Don't step on that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
You know, this is interesting. One of the things we try to do on this show is put people together who've never met before, which we've done, and exchange ideas that otherwise wouldn't even come together, like a very small mini Makers Faire. But what you just talked about the laser backscatter on a lightweight, inexpensive drone flying, not carrying the heavy laser. The heavy laser's on a ship or something over here on some ground-based location.
Oh, and we're taking it even a lot further. One of the exhibits at the Mini Maker Faire was my partner, one of my research partners, Ben Hickman. And we're in part of a movement within the scientific community. A lot of science instruments are just too expensive. Like a good spectrometer starts at about $7,000. We have just released an open source spectrometer that is as good as the $7,000 one that costs a little over $100 to build. And we're keeping the ball rolling. We're doing things like CTDs, which measure conductivity, temperature, and depth. That gives you salinity. I'd love to be able to go put a collection of these over at Allen Davis, along with some pH meters, temperature, and so forth, so that we can get a better idea of the flow of the waters, the brackish waters within a mangrove swamp.
Do you know Craig Glenn by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay, we're working with Craig on using infrared anyway to find the subterranean seeps. He's been on this show talking about that. He's got some work going on Maui right now.
Actually, on Monday, we're going to have a meeting of scientists on that specific thing, you know, how to get really inexpensive science instruments out so that even the have-not schools can afford to do advanced science.
What I was going to mention about the laser reflection is one of the groups they work with in this experiment we do every quarter in California is called Aerospace Corp, and they've got a MEMS reflector, which, you know, is about as big as the end of the pin here, and hanging it on a 1 pound drone, let the thing fly randomly as far away from the center as you can, and use that as a laser return mirror, and observe for molecules in the air above a banana farm, for example, and look for the bunchy top banana virus indicators, things like that. But the beauty is putting the heavy laser, which you can't fly, in a stationary location, and fly the lightweight reflector. And this is changing so much of how people view sensors and the application of sensors to these problems.
This is actually one of the other ideas that Makers Fairs and the Maker Movement is about, and that is taking all of these great ideas. You know, I mean, that could have been one of those anecdotal stories where it took, 20 guys $1 million to invent that idea, or it could have been 2 guys who had to solve a problem they couldn't quite figure out how. And you get enough of these Maker Fairs going, and you get a lot of really good ideas from very creative people, where 20 or 30 or 40% of the ideas that come up with, everyone's kind of seen it before, or many people have seen it before, and a lot of the ideas are sort of cutting edge, but one or two of those ideas are really genuinely different ways of looking at a problem than anyone's ever approached it before. And by getting a lot of creative people together, giving them space to do that, you really advance, I think, the overall world of technology.
And what I was intrigued by in a meeting we had last week, again with all the drone users, Craig was there. I'm sure Kevin Kelly was representing SOAS, so he brought that story in. But what we have is a situation where Makers Fairs exist on their own, not part of the university. Schools like Iolani, Ponoho, and Roosevelt have robotics programs. Castle High School has a robotics program, Kailua. And when those kids, those are like a Makers Faire, those robotics programs, similar to that. And so when they've graduated looking for a school to go to, wouldn't it be nice to have a true innovation center, an accelerator, where they could continue that at a university level?
You bet. I've been trying to find funding for a commercial grade 3D printer. Like, for instance, my goal, there's a device that we use a lot. It's called a Sea Glider. It's an autonomous underwater vehicle. And it swims by shifting a battery pack fore and aft to change the center of gravity, and then inflates a bladder with oil to change the buoyancy. Well, there really isn't any reason why I can't 3D print the pressure housing, the fairings, and things like that. Right now, they're $175,000 each. My guesstimate, is that if I can 3D print that, I can probably drop it under 30,000. Especially since the technology inside is fairly old. I'm thinking I can probably start using, some of the modern single board computers and shrink the electronics by a factor of 5.
So what you need is a commercial grade, large scale 3D printer.
And I have a grant into HP for their brand new one that's supposed to be emerging in 2017.
But wouldn't it be nice to have this innovation center where that sits there and laser cutting sits there?
Yeah,
and
there's small ones throughout the university, but right now, unfortunately, the legal eagles are involved, and the liability of sharing your labs is so high that nobody wants to go down that road. What we need is our legislature to go and help with the liability issues. I'm sorry, if someone goes and cuts their finger, they shouldn't be able to sue the university for $1 million. I'm sorry, if you cut your finger and you're careless, put a Band-Aid on it. Let's use some common sense. And that's one of the real problems missing in some of these laws. And it is actually hampering innovation because people are scared to share their facilities.
Well, more than that, doesn't it also direct students who could potentially be University of Hawaii students to go to Purdue or something like that instead?
You bet.
And so we're losing the brain drain game, and then once they're gone, it'll come back.
Yeah, and that was the entire reason why I founded my lab. My lab's called the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory. It is to balance the 4-year university experience for computer science and electrical engineering students. I will teach advanced networking technology and go through a lot of the emerging stuff. The kids will actually help me write articles for InfoWorld magazine, run competitive reviews, and the very best will go with me to help build the world's largest temporary network in Las Vegas at the Interop trade show.
So if that could be extended to include the other aspects of beyond just network operations, but engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, sensor optimization. One thing we've got to do, and this is a fantastic conversation, and you probably respect this one. We got to get away, on the drone world. We got to get away from applying consumer level cameras and such as sensor packages. We have to start modifying sensors to make them custom tuned to the mission at hand. We don't need a 2.5-hour battery in a camera for a mission that only lasts 30 minutes.
Right. But if you flip the coin over though, we're actually using a very inexpensive Kodak panorama camera. It's one of the Pix Pro line. And instead of spending $15,000, $20,000 for a cloud tracker just to image clouds as they go by so we can predict when the clouds are going to shade photovoltaic cells, we're going to use the Kodak Pix Pro and dramatically reduce it down under $1,000. So there's
a balance,
two sides of the coin.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other side of that coin when we get back. We're going to take our first break here and be back in about 40 seconds when Zuri lets us out.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. You know, Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized, right here on ThinkTech. Aloha.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Friday afternoon, once again, folks, downtown Honolulu, Ted Ralston and our Where the Road Leads show. This week, as last week, the road leads to Iolani, and we've got to get back on that subject a little bit, as well as it led to Ala Moana last week, where we had fantastic interactions with the public through the Makers Faire on the very technical end, and then we had the operational and service side through the Boy Scouts at the Makihiki. But both of those events are great opportunities for interacting the public with the emergence of technology and critical thinking. That's the other thing going on here is critical thinking in a way that none of us are raised on. And this is what I'm speaking to myself because I'm a lot older than you guys, but we were raised more on a rote basis than we were in this creative basis because we're into object-based programming these days. Our programming was all Fortran, so everything was your own.
I've seen Fortran once.
You've seen that. They have it in the museum down here.
I'm sure they do.
Hey, I have a chunk of wire this long from Grace Hopper, the inventor of COBOL.
Really?
So I got my start in the mainframe days.
So we're talking about the Makers Fairs, we're talking about the Maker Space, we're talking about some kind of innovation engine that the university could proudly run if we got over some hurdles here. And we're talking about the two sides of the coin. We mentioned just before the break about the reapplication of consumer level systems. And in some cases where optimization isn't an issue, that may be fine. In areas where optimization is an issue, such as in the world of drones, it's a different equation, perhaps, especially as we think of the economics of the situation. And the controversy is that you'd like to have drones have throwaway payloads, so if you lose it, you don't have a problem. So Best Buy is the source.
Sure. Actually, one of my very good friends, Father Robert Balliser, he's a host on TV with me. He actually runs a show called Know-How and actually goes through and designs drones from scratch. So they become a lot less expensive. But for me, that's great because now I can afford to build what are, in essence, throwaway drones. If I'm going to be flying a drone with some imaging gear over fresh lava, and if I had a failure, if I was flying a $20,000 or $30,000 drone, maybe my grant's over. But if I'm flying maybe a $2,000, $3,000 drone, oh darn, let's try again.
Well, that actually, that economic equation extends all the way to first responders and search and rescue and this sort of thing. If something only costs a couple $1,000 and the replaceable component is only $500, you can use it. You'll just extend yourself and use it because the consequence of loss is not high. If it costs $30,000, that's a whole half a person for the year that you can't hire because you lost the drone. So that economic balance, in fact, that's a really interesting subject for Makers Faire, is where this economic balance point is.
You know, most makers are working on budgets of a few dollars. And some of the things being created and some of the things being produced are just phenomenal on those budgets. I watched a video yesterday from a man who, I don't know if you've heard the I can't remember the name of the brand, but the lock that everybody has on their gym locker, you know, the standard 3.
Master, yeah.
The Master, yeah. And that's recently been hacked to the point where in about 2 minutes, you can get one open. Anyone. in the
Mechanical
world.
lock.
Yeah, mechanical
Yeah,
lock.
it actually twists it and tries everything and flips the
Yeah,
lock
and
so forth.
so the guy who figured out the technique to do it in 8 tries or less now has it to the point where you can, for under $100, build a device that will sit there and do that. Why you would need such a device, well, that's not a big deal. But what he does in his 12-minute YouTube video is he shows you how to manufacture it. You open up some CAD software, he shows you how to use that, he shows you how to manufacture the parts you need, he shows you how to assemble it all together, he gives you the source code, and then someone else who has an interesting, similar idea can look at that and say, okay, well, for under $100, I can build that, and I have this other idea. Well, let's see, he shows me this, and this other project showed me this, and I put it together, and I make some new invention, and you get all kinds of really ingenious ideas coming out of you know, bargain basement hobby.
So this is sort of a form of crowdsourcing of engineering. Is
Basically,
it not,
yeah.
or technology.
You know, you mentioned age, so I'll bring it up again. I grew up in the era. I was 7 years old when we got our first Apple II Plus at home, and so that meant that I grew up learning to use computers from a very young age, and I'm old enough that the school system was still pretty good at the time. So I kind of got the best of both
You
worlds.
learn how to write by hand?
I did.
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
Cursive
that's
even.
you go back a long way.
I do, but I was one of that first generation of hackers when hacker was still a good term, not a bad term. And in my generation, the problem was I was in a big city in a small place, and I didn't have access to other people like me. Now what you have with YouTube, with all kinds of social media, with Makers Fairs and other programs like this, what you have is an environment where the 5 or 10% who are really into engineering just because they're passionate about the process of inventing things get together, and the ideas that fly in those rooms are just amazing. And so Maker Faire and these other programs really inspire that small group of people.
Well, the entire web is a virtual Makers Faire, right, in that regard. 'Cause
exactly.
you can,
Right, and what's nice with being able to have things like Instructables and so forth, where you have all these lessons, it becomes very, very possible for people that maybe don't have the intensity or don't have the time to take other ideas and combine them in unique ways. And then you start getting this groundswell of designing, redesigning, improving, and it feeds upon itself very, very quickly.
Yeah.
and we've never had this before in the history of engineering or
No.
technology
No.
products, to my knowledge. They all came out of the big box companies, and you opened a box and went to work. But now what's actually, do you think, taking place? Is that there's enough retired people out there now who are not quitting what they used to do and are contributing to this pool of intelligence?
You know, my suspicion is that for years and years and years, the really creative engineering types, they would finish a day at work, they would go home, and they would tinker in the garage. Maybe, you know, you hear the anecdotal stories. They worked on cars, they worked on, you know, some sort of electronic project. They would build things. But the things they built, because they weren't surrounded by other people like that, the things they built were fairly, by today's standards, fairly primitive. Silicon Valley especially, right around the time of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, when they were getting together, the culture there was one of building collaboratively. And that sparked the whole idea.
So
that,
that's a key word, building collaboratively. Collaboration is
Yeah.
that marker, a difference between the
Yeah.
past and the present.
you know, 100 years ago, 2 people could invent a car and make tremendous progress in the industry. But nowadays, the age of the independent inventor, I think, is mostly gone. There will still be the occasional person who comes up with some just amazing idea and produces the next big product. But we're in an era now where 10 people or 20 people or 200 people or 50,000 people get together and work on a collaborative project. And suddenly you get things that a few people in isolation aren't capable of. And good examples of that would be any major computer company, right? Microsoft, Google, Facebook, you name them. Other examples of that would be some of the work being done at places like, with hybrid electric cars and with sustainable energy. You get a lot of people together, and each of them have independent ideas that by themselves might not have huge value, but you put 2 good ideas together, or 3 or 4, and suddenly you have something that the overall value explodes beyond.
Or
that
even
actually,
open source software.
Yeah, yeah.
that actually extends to even to massive projects. I came out of the aerospace industry and was watching the rocket business for a long time, and we got, my company was involved in making rockets, and Lockheed made rockets, but a couple of big rocket makers. Elon Musk came around and said, I'm going to take you guys' business away, and I'm going to sell rocket launches for half what you sell them for. So,
And part of that was, building on, like a lot of other people
guess
did
what
the
he's
research
doing?
that led to it.
He's selling rocket rides for half of what,
Yeah.
what the big companies are
Yeah,
selling.
and so some of that is standing on the shoulders of giants, and some of that is just that, he's surrounded by absolutely brilliant people. And we're in a world now where you can get, it's not hard to put a room together that has 50 or 100 of the world's brightest.
Which is
in the
what you
same
guys
room.
are doing in the makers fairs, and you're doing in the maker spaces that exist here in Kaka'ako and other
Yeah,
locations.
collaboration instead of competition. That's
Yeah.
pretty much what it comes down to. That's the big change.
Yeah.
Before we were competing for resources.
Yeah.
Now that the resources are getting more plentiful, now we can afford to kind of put our egos check them at the door, and now saying, let's go build something really cool together.
Yeah, and open source software is a perfect example of that. It used to be if you had a great software idea, you immediately wanted to prevent anyone else in the world from seeing it. Then came the era where some people didn't care, and they would put their idea out there. And that led to the idea that, all of these really great independent projects, so I'll use Google as an example. Google invented basically the world's largest database. It's a way to store, for example, a copy of the entire internet, and be able to search it and sort it and do all that. And a few people said, that's a really good idea. They read the paper. I think we could do something similar, and they invented Hadoop, which gives anybody at home the ability, it's open source software, anybody at home has the ability at home to create their own little mini version of Google. And suddenly, something that Google might be working on in private, there's probably 500 or 1,000 other people around the world who have similar ideas and saying, well, how would I solve this problem, and trying to do so.
Well, speaking of collaboration, and both of you mentioned that, how strong that is, and it's a social pressure, not so much a technical subject, it's really how people work together and such. But people watching this may have some ideas, and they'd like to hook in with either a makerspace or the Makers Faire or one of the ongoing clubs or something like that. How would someone do that? How would they find out where to go and who to call?
Well, the Honolulu Maker Faire website is probably a good place. We have a volunteer link on there to keep going. There's also a Facebook page and Twitter and things like that. The reality is the Mini Maker Faire has nearly doubled in 1 year. And if we keep going, we think we'll double again. So, right, this year, lots of things could have happened but didn't happen because we didn't have enough people to help. So someone actually stepped up during the fair. There's a group, the Honolulu Python users group, that's getting together. They want to sponsor the Raspberry Pi classes next year, but so does Leeward Community College. So now instead of having just one really lightweight Raspberry Pi introduction class, now we're going to have a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced class, and now all of a sudden that section's tripled in size. I don't think we're going to double next year. I think we're going to triple next year.
Well, just as on a personal note, I had a talk on UAVs on the Saturday afternoon, and following me was a gentleman named Ed Peer from Oceanit. And I was astounded. He was presenting some target recognition software, rapid action, 10,000 frames per second, high resolution image extraction from video, which is exactly what we needed in a project we just left earlier in the day down at UH. And so I could not believe I found that at Makers Faire. It was, I wouldn't even know where to ask on any kind of a blog where that target recognition software existed, right here in Honolulu, and not far from UH. And so we've actually had a meeting yesterday as a consequence of that. And so I thank Makers Faire very much for arranging our schedule so that I ran into Ed at the podium. So pure luck, but collaboration as well. And actually we're going to extend that, I think, into an exercise called Maritime Domain Awareness in a month in California. But collaboration is interesting, and another thought comes to mind, and you're very close to the drone business, so you would know this better, but as we get past collaboration and sharing ideas and building things, now it comes time to sell them and to make money at them, or at least cover their expenses. So the drone world, as you know, is full of manufacturers all over the place, Turkey, China, some in the United States, and some in Boston, and all over the place. And the flight management systems are collaborative in general, pretty much all the same. And the GPSs are all the same. It's just it's a composition of pieces that are similar from one to the other. There's got to be a shakeout of some kind here into some form of, you know, maybe micro, mini, mid-size, and large or something. I don't see how the business can support so many different manufacturers, so many different characteristics. Yet each one is the peak of some collaborative effort within a bunch of smart guys, yet they're a little bit different from one to the other. So how do we protect the collaboration and the motivation and the creativity, but yet put out something that is, you know, killer from a competition perspective, and has dominates the business? That's it.
Well, I lean towards market pressure. You know, the laissez-faire theory of market. You know, we didn't control the PC industry. The PC industry controlled itself. I think the same thing's going to happen to 3D printers. The same thing's going to happen to drones. I always tell my viewers for my shows is, vote with your dollars. If you like it, buy it. Don't steal it, buy it. And the people that buy it are voting with their dollars.
And, you know, and blog about it, write about it, tell your friends about it. You know, if you're, the drone club is actually a great forum for this, right? If you're interested in drones, you come to the drone club and you ask around, you know, I want to build a racing drone, or I want to build a drone just for flying and, you know, doing some aerial photography, or I want to build a drone for X, Y, Z. And lots of people there will give you their insight on what they built, why they built it. And sometimes they'll say, well, I went this choice because it's the cheapest. But sometimes they say, I went this choice because this flight controller is completely programmable. It's open, you know, all the software for it is open source. I can hack my drone and make it do all kinds of interesting things. Or this particular one has a better, you know, better long distance range, or better video characteristics, or whatever. And so they'll, by surrounding yourself with people who are into that, getting to the club meetings, getting that environment, you create a forum where the best technology moves forward. So then we just make sure that those people
once
have
again,
access.
collaboration is the underlying
absolutely.
concept.
Right.
Let's pick that up in terms of how collaboration can become a function within the makerspace. Stand it up. And
well, I think we've got some great things. You know, cross-pollination of technologies. I actually teach an intended design class.
Let's hold that and get back to that very subject after the next break.
Fair enough.
To Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy on Wednesday. And we have Sharon Moriwaki, my co-host and co-chair of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And we have Warren Bohlmeyer today, a special guest with the Hawaii Renewable Energy Alliance, and also a member of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum.
In fact, he's our Renewable Energy Working Group Chair. So he takes care of all of our...
You ought to see him in song and dance, too. He does the musical part of the show. Sharon is more serious than that, but not much more serious. So anyway, what do you think of this show? I mean, is this good?
I think this is good. We hope it's good. We hope it attracts a lot more people than our forum, so that people can see what's going on in energy and clean energy, and call in, write in, tweet,
Yeah, we
or
want
Twitter.
that. We want public engagement, civic engagement from everybody, because that's the only way we're going to get down the road on this, right, Warren?
Yeah, I think so, and it's an opportunity for guys like me to share a little bit of their know and sometimes get the facts right. Who was that guy that said, just give me the facts, you know, start with the facts and then work from there? Oh, it was Dragnet guy, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Jack,
I was just in grade school then. I barely remember that.
just the facts,
Just
man.
the facts, man.
Here on Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday from 4 to 5. You'll see. Come back soon. Right, Sharon?
Great.
Warren?
Yes.
Still Friday afternoon, folks, here in downtown Honolulu. Ted Ralston with our show Where the Road Leads this week, as last week, and probably a lot of weeks in the future. That road will lead to Iolani, where amazing things are happening. And we have the two of the principal activists from the last week's event, last Saturday's event called the Mini Makers Faire, which won't be mini much longer, I think, Brian, from what you're implying here.
We're actually hoping the powers that be from Make Magazine will come and visit next year. And if they decide that the fair has grown enough, then they will actually interject themselves into the running of the fair, and it becomes from mini to full make, and we get a significantly bigger budget, a lot more resources, and obviously we're going to have to find a new venue because we're going to need a lot more space.
Right, the convention center sounds like the
Convention center, or maybe Blaisdell. Both are good venues.
And again, the underlying concept here, which I just been struck by how you guys brought this both out, is collaboration. And I want to introduce on that thought a group that is not here, but they think in terms of complex adaptive systems and how the collaboration among people, or lack of collaboration among people, leads to success or failure in endeavors. And they look at a way to map out massive and large social complex interactions, almost like a weather map, and you see where the weather patterns occlude and you got problems, where they don't, you're in good shape. But that's really all about collaboration as well. That is, working your way through the interface where the going is tough is where collaboration wins. So it would seem to me that in the promoting further understanding and awareness of the notion of collaboration and how that turns into greater Makers Faire functionality would be a subject itself within the Makers Faire, a seminar on collaboration.
Sure, and I think a lot of it too is we have this barrier, you know, the 2,400 miles of water throws up a psychological barrier for a lot of people, saying, oh, it's great in Silicon Valley. I said, no, you don't understand. Hawaii has done amazing things. When I was an undergrad, I was a student slave on the AlohaNet project with Norm Abramson.
Internet.
And those coolers that you plug into your cigarette lighter, that was actually invented by an electrical engineering prof sitting in Kihei Lagoon thinking, I'd really like to have a cold beer, but I don't want to turn on the diesel. And there's been just absolutely stunning things. My project under DARPA was a contributor to a standard now called Zigbee for personal area networks. Hawaii has done a stunning array of things. Yanagi Machi and
You know, that's not well known, is it? That's well known by the insiders, perhaps, but it isn't well appreciated by the legislature, and certainly and by the people in general. So we need a couple like the Star Advertisers have done a very good job of doing these three-day exposures of issues that are going on. Why don't we take this subject and tee it up in front of the Star Advertiser and have them do an in-depth on 3 successive days?
If you know who to call.
Well,
Absolutely.
Nadine Cam did a magnificent story on Mini Maker Faire, and I went to school with her. Heck, we were on Kaleo together. Let's go twist her arm.
So promoting the idea, people can get a hold of the Mini Makers Faire through,
Facebook.
You mentioned through the, what would they, I'm not a Facebook guy, so, sorry.
Just search for Honolulu Maker Faire.
Search for Honolulu Makers Faire on Google, right?
Yeah.
And you'll come up
You'll
with
find a
enough
whole bunch of
hits
them,
that you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And that would lead you to, that's like the top of the pyramid. Then you have the maker spaces that are commercial spaces out there.
Oahu Maker Space over in Kalihi and High Capacity.
Kalihi, right. We got
North.
2 of them here in Kakako. We got Pro Hub and we've got Box Jelly, both in Kakako. And who knows, there may be more around the city.
A lot of schools have maker spaces now. The legislature is supposedly going to be funding some maker spaces in the libraries.
At high schools.
No, public libraries.
Public libraries.
Open to the public.
That's unreal. Now, what that comes back to is we've got to do something at the university in terms of a university level makerspace. And you mentioned we have this problem, of course, across departments at this point in time, which we have to then
It's liability.
expose and get around.
Let's go fix the liability issue, and we can do a lot more sharing. There's a movement with David Garmeyer and I. We're actually trying to go put together two colleges, engineering and SOAST, put together a space so that the researchers in both colleges could go out and have an advanced makerspace, and it died on the vine. liability.
Well, and you know, back to this idea of collaboration, right? One of the things that I think the younger generations now embody, especially more than say my father's generation, my grandfather's generation, is the idea that if rules get in the way, we're just going to go around the rules, right? And if the university can't come up with a good space for students and young adults to be doing this thing, they're just going to avoid the university and go find other spaces where they
Or
can.
go to Purdue.
And yeah, and the university loses out, and
Yeah.
you know, potentially the entire Hawaiian you know, group mind loses out on that. You know, when rules get in the way, and I'm sort of that ilk too, right? If rules get in the way, I figure out how to get around the rules, and the younger generations don't even figure out how to get around them, they just break them. You know, this is what I want to do, I don't care about liability, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, I'm just going to go do it. And I think it's time to help foster the kind of innovation that's possible when you take barriers down.
And that does another point. Taking the barriers down, we still need these systems as we create them, which are getting more comprehensive. They're becoming more mainline. They're doing more of our daily work for us. They still have to be reliable and safe. And so that brings into the picture the methods by which safety and reliability are designed into a product, especially software. And we can't have things that fail. And so I'm thinking that
Well,
in
I'm
addition,
going to counter you on that thought.
Okay.
If you don't allow for things that fail, you preclude people from taking chances, right? So you want to have failure be something that's celebrated as part of the path
oh,
to
I
success.
got that right.
But certainly you want to do it in a way where when things fail,
I'll
they fail in a
rephrase
safe
my
way.
point. We can't afford catastrophic consequences.
certainly,
And
certainly.
so we make them small so they don't have any catastrophic consequences.
And you know, one of the things drone flyers in the state here especially, but all over the country are dealing with are how do you fly drones in a way that's not disruptive to air traffic, to you know, the security needs. I mean, there was another drone at the White House event today. I don't know if you heard about that.
I saw something on the Google News.
You know, and the Drone Club is really big on making sure people are aware, you know, in Hawaii you can fly here, 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 and here, and there's a lot of places you can fly. But there's some basic rules you have to follow, and if you're willing to follow the rules, you keep it open for everybody to be able to explore.
You know, on that account, I think that we've had so many drone programs on here. That's how I got involved in this field with Jay Fidelis, drones in the Philippines and at UH and such. But we've had many discussions on that subject. We're sitting right now with the rulemaking going on. So the rules by which drones will be flown, at least at the first instantiation, are being cooked inside the FAA right now. You know, they're getting lenient, but we still have to impose this concept of safety over it. But I did want to say, to the point you made, in addition to the laws and the rules and such, there's also the aspect of respect for personal privacy and personal rights. I just want to make one final appeal. The floating lantern ceremony on Memorial Day, the organizers are imploring us and asking us, please, to leave our drones at home. Nobody wants drones flying over a crowd of 50,000 people where you know, injury can occur. And this is sort of a very solemn ceremony, and it doesn't want to be interrupted and bothered by blinking lights or sounding of buzzing bees overhead. So folks out there who are thinking of taking your drone down to Ala Park on Memorial Day for that, please think twice about it. Respect the wishes of the organizers, and we'll have a better day. Anyway, we're coming to the end of our allocated 45 minutes of time to chat about these really important subjects, and I really enjoy meeting you, Brian, and the energy you bring to this from the perspective that we actually need to carry on a conversation afterwards here, as well as Jeff. You and I met once before at the Drone Club meeting, but we never had this level of a discussion. So my mind's on fire with things that we can build as follow-on discussions here. And it's all related to this notion of collaboration at the makerspace. Let me ask each of you to tell the audience what you would like to have them take away from this conversation, and maybe a promo of once again how to get a hold of you.
Oh, I'm Brian Chee. I can be reached at chee@hawaii.edu, or my Twitter is ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. I would very much like your audience to go and talk to your legislators. You know, if they don't want to make laws in a vacuum, and it's you, the people, that have the responsibility. Government in America is not easy. It means you have to get up off your behind and do something about it. So if you want to see makerspace, you want to see collaboration, you want to see Hawaii to have a world-class education system, you need to tell your legislatures that.
Okay, so-
Please write them.
All right, write them, communicate with them, sit on them, whatever it takes.
You bet.
And Jeff?
I'm Jeff at jke.net, and I'm always interested in meeting people who are interested in building things. If you have a great idea, if you have even an idea that you don't know if it's great or not, find people around you who can help, who you can collaborate with, and lots of little ideas become great.
Self-promoted collaboration.
Absolutely.
And don't ever let barriers get in your way.
Find a club you like, find an activity you like, and get involved with the group.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on today, Brian and Jeff. It's been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. And folks, we'll see you next Friday.